everyone. Welcome back to the inaugural Protect Us Kids virtual conference. My name is Russ Cohen. I serve as a volunteer for the organization. Our next speaker is Chelsea Miller. A little background on Chelsea. She holds a BA in Sociology and African American Studies from the University of Houston. She is currently pursuing a master's in social work at Baylor University. Chelsea also has experience mentoring teens, working with nonprofits, and providing direct services to commercially sexually exploited youth. She's also served as a wraparound specialist in HISD. Chelsea is passionate about combining racial disparities, protecting marginalized groups, and enjoys traveling, sports, volunteering, spending time with family and friends. Welcome, Chelsea, and I will pass the mic over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Russ. Good, wonderful afternoon, everyone. You may notice that I have on a turtleneck. In Texas, it just reached fall, so I am all in for that. But I also just wanted to say thank you so much for allowing me to present and share my knowledge with you all today. I greatly appreciate it. Yeah, definitely about me, everything that Russ mentioned. But I take a lot of pride in having a lot of direct service in the actual field. So I've worked with quite a few law enforcement, FBI, a lot of wraparound support. And I think that's where a lot of my knowledge and just experience come from, and also becoming a TBR practitioner. So really focusing on that trauma-informed approach and just overall, how can we, as different organizations, implement trauma-informed so that we could just do the least amount of harm. So I will get started with my slideshow. I'm going to present my slides, if it'll show. Okay, here we go. Perfect. So this again is my about me. All right, technology. All right. So in this presentation, we will discuss and elaborate on how to build trust between residents, local authorities, and organizations using a trauma-informed lens and approach. We will go through different key strategies to approach crimes within a community and how to further build that cohesion between the two of community and law enforcement. We will not only discuss the importance of community involvement, but we will also examine law enforcement, community resilience, that physical environmental safety, which is a fairly new piece in the social work world, and youth engagement within the community. We will also discuss different ways to build cohesion within the community and to continue to identify and bridge gaps to better serve communities and the people that exist with them while implementing trauma-informed care. So that is the overview. That is what we're going to discuss during our time together. But the four just main objectives we are going to touch on today is that community policing. Then we're going to take a look at those environmental designs. Then we're going to look at youth engagement programs and then the models I'll have throughout the presentation, okay? So this is just a little overview example of what trauma-informed principles or just trauma-informed approaches entail of. I know trauma-informed is a big push here, especially in Texas, where we want to make sure that all of our service providers are trauma-informed so that anyone that may come in contact with anyone, not just our at-risk populations, our at-risk youth, but anyone that we may come in contact with, because we know trauma isn't always visible, that we do have these principles and we handle everyone with that same care. So just as a quick overview, sort of what it looks like or where it's going to start is at that trust and safety. So making sure as an organization or just as a community that is there. Then we're going to go over to choice and collaboration. So allowing for choice, allowing for that collaboration between the parties. Then we're going to look at empowerment with skills and knowledge, cultural and gender considerations, peer support, and mutual self-help. So you will see a lot of these principles sprinkled in throughout the objectives when I hit them. But of course, if you always need me to elaborate a little bit more, I will allow for questions at the end, and we can dive a little bit deeper into how these trauma informed principles may look in an organization. All right, so we're going to move on to our first objective to discuss the community policing concept. So, this concept just pretty much embodies law enforcement working closely with the community to bridge those disparities. So, examples of this could be models of the community policing and their outcomes, and I'll also include a few little models throughout. This topic. But what are the benefits, right? Because we always like that cost benefit analysis. And the benefit is we want to improve the trust between police and residents, leading to a more effective crime prevention and also even lowering that crime rate. So, just diving a little bit deeper into what this objective may look like, um, community policing is a strategy that focuses on developing relationships within community members between police officers. So, the strategy is mainly going to focus on five core ideas that focus on how to effectively engage in communities. I think the most crucial one that I have seen during my experience is just pretty much building that trust and encouraging community engagement. I think this is really big because I feel like a lot of trust within the community and law enforcement has almost been burned, right? I think that now we have, or we live in this day and age where media and phones and internet has played a big part in things that we're able to see immediately, and so we're able to see live and raw and just out there footage that has left a great distaste in a lot of communities with police. So just that distrust that is created in communities within the police or within law enforcement, and just figuring out how can we build that trust back, or how can we gain that trust back up. And so we're going to take a look at that in addition to the trauma informed principle that can go along with it. And so one of the principles of the trauma informed policies that we saw before is just promises, or that trust, right? So when we look at promises, or we look at gaining that trust in communities, I think the biggest thing that I had seen while working with law enforcement or being out in the community with law enforcement was promises, right? And not even on a promise of like a very individualistic matter, but a promise that law enforcement may tell the community, right? Like, hey, we're gonna stop this, or we're gonna catch this and make sure they're this. When in actuality, if that's not a fact, or if that's not something that can be proven, that's how a lot of promises are built but not upheld. So that seems to create a lot of distrust in the community within the individuals and also law enforcement. So that's one of the biggest thing when looking at how to stay trauma informed, is making sure when we tell somebody that something's going to happen or when we're going to do something, especially when someone holds that place of power like law enforcement typically do in communities, that we often stick to it and we go through whatever we're being told or whatever is being told to that community. Um, the next thing we're going to talk about is interacting, or how to build that trust, right? So, how can we build it? Interacting within the community. I have seen many of times, and also I think I've seen on Facebook, right, how there are police officers who interact with the community. They're outside playing basketball, they're outside showing their face in the community, but we're not in the community because there's crime, or we're not in the community because, we're on a case, or we're not necessarily investigating something. We're out in the community. we're meeting with the people, letting them know, hey, this is the person that exists outside of a badge. This is the person that exists when we're not in a high crisis situation. So I did wanted to list that as familiarity helps a lot. And it brings that awareness of just like, hey, I exist outside of those tough situations, right? The next point we're going to move to is listening to concerns. I think this go quite well or hand in hand with those promises or building that trust because we want to make sure that when someone tells us something, we feel validated. Our concerns feel heard, right? We never want our someone to feel like their words are going on to ears that may not be listening. And so, one of the big just sort of movements that I think catapulted this is in 2020, there was a movement forward launched Faith in Blue Weekend. And this aimed to build bridges between law enforcement and communities through activities such as service projects and forums. So I thought that was a really big thing, and it showed a lot of progress, right? And another way that looks like is like Officers Night Out. I know we have that here in Texas, where communities rally around the police, and we're able to voice our concerns, or we're able to voice our thoughts, and they are sort of taken into account, right? But what this is going to do, it's going to create dialogue and concerns and invite the community to be able to hold those spaces for forums to voice their concerns for their community, and voice their concerns for their safety. And so I think that's a really, really good example and a really, really powerful way to build that team cohesion and also build that trust. Um, so that's what we have noticed, or I have noticed. It does really well. One of the pleasures that I also have is that I go into schools at Love 146. We have a prevention curriculum that allows me to go in school to talk about human trafficking. Not only do we talk about human trafficking, we talk about an array of other topics. And within those topics, we talk and we mention law enforcement because we like for our youth to identify safe places, safe people. Oftentimes, we hear that our youth feel scared. Even adults, I've talked to adults, and I've heard adults say, "Oh, I'm worried or I'm scared to talk to the police." And so, just what this does is just open the space, open the forum to say, "Hey." We hear you. You don't have to be scared. We live in a world where online bullying is happening a lot, sextortion, revenge porn, a lot of like CSAM is coming up, right? So where do our youth or where do our parents have the outlet to go say, hey, my kid is enduring this, or hey, we're experiencing this. How can you help? Right? Something can going down to the police station can be traumatic. But if we're showing our face or if we're saying, hey, this is a community, please let me know what's going on. Those are more those non-formal ways that we can help bring our youth and our community just in together, so that they're not experiencing the shame or they're not experiencing any of that victim blaming, and it's continuous and then it just unravels. So that is a personal connection that I have, and just something that I noticed while being in schools. We have youth, we have parents of the youth wanting to speak up, but those conversations are hard when the only encounters we have had with police have been from here in that place of power, and just that differential level, right? All right. Also, to talk on this, this also bridges to me those wraparound services in the community, because once we're in the community, those bring way for offering other resources that might exist. I have seen that as well. I've seen community policing where police have been out to schools, right? I had the ability to, while working in an elementary school, I was able to bring talk to the city police, and I was able to bring the police onto campus. So them also showing their face on campus. We had again that night out that's really big in Texas. We had that night out at our campus, and not only was the community, the police were there, but we also had social workers, we had counselors, we had pantries. It was just a big melting pot of resources that were available, and they all worked hand in hand to pretty much figure out any of the solutions or any problems that the community might have had. How can we in one place gather so that the resources are here for people and they don't have to go out? How can we keep these resources in the community is the overall goal. And that brings me to my next topic, partnering with communities. Again, really, really important, really helps build that cohesion, that trust, and also bridge that gap of knowing who you need to call or who's available, putting that familiarity back, and being able to say, hey, this is the person that I can call if needed. Um, so just a few programs that would exist within the community that already exist, and I'm not sure if they may exist in your state or your area, but I did just want to go through a few and just see what they're about and sort of their initiatives, just to spark any ideas. So, of course, we have that National Night Out, where they offer free identification cards for youth, where they offer resources. They have materials about online safety, bullying. So, again, bringing the resources to the community. Then we have the initiative of advancing the Black and Blue, and that's going to bring local leaders, communities, police departments to create effective community policing solutions. So that's a really good one. I've heard about the Positive Interaction Program. It's a program here in Houston, Texas, and it aims to educate citizens about how police department function. That is actually one of the programs that I was able to bring into my elementary school, and it was amazing. Even though they were tiny humans, they still were able to see, oh, okay, so this is what a part of the police station does, or this is what law enforcement does. Oh, I didn't know that this existed. We even have something here where there's law enforcement on foot when natural disasters happen, warning people, hey, let's get you to a shelter. Hey, let's get you here. Hey, let's get you the resources you need, but they're on foot. So that has been tremendously helpful in that community policing aspect, because there's different departments for different things that I didn't even know about as an adult. It wasn't until I spoke and I brought them into the elementary and they were just like, hey, this is all we do. We have a trafficking vice so much. But I would have never known had I not invited the law enforcement to that elementary campus. So, yeah, that is community policing. That is law enforcement working closely. How can we work closely with the community to bridge those disparities? So the next objective that we're going to talk on is environmental design. So this concept is modifying the physical environment to deter crime. So improve street lighting, secure building designs, letting people know this is private property, this is public property, sidewalks, things in that nature. I'm going to share a success story of an environmental design, such a simple change, but how it brought about huge success. And then we're going to talk about the benefits, right? Because again, how does this benefit us as a community? And then within law enforcement, it's going to be that increased perception of safety and an actual reduction in crime rates. So, pretty much, this is one of the environmental success stories. In 2021, New York City paired up with the New York Housing Unit, Affordable Housing Unit, and they wanted to do a trial. They took 40 housing units or 40 units that was on 40 housing units. Yeah, they took 40 housing units in a high crime area. They said, okay, I'm going to do 20 and we're going to put up street lights. And then the other 20, we're not going to put up street lights on their, street. So on the 20 that were due to get the street lights installed, they got the street lights. The other 20 did not. And what studies show, or pretty much how that trial ended, was a 30% reduction rate in street crime. And so it's something as simple as like, oh, lights or like street lights, which I've had the privilege to always have street lights. So that was foreign to me, right? But it's things or it's minor changes that produce big results like those street lights, reducing those crimes, right? Those high index crimes. So pretty much crime prevention through environmental design pretty much defines spaces, right? It clearly defines areas as private, semi-private, or public, determining who can be in those spaces legally and not legally. Then we have those territorial reinforcements. So we're using design elements such as sidewalks, landscaping, and porches to distinguish between those public and private areas. And then we get to the aesthetics, right? So keeping the grass mode. Is the grass mode, is it cut low? Is it at a 3 or 4? But trimmed, bushes are trimmed, broken glass, blinds repaired. Then we move on to lighting, right? Which is what was sort of trialed in this control variable, but installing motion detector lighting on the outside of homes, timers, interior lightings, letting people know that you're home, right? And then we have the actual, again, landscaping, which is keeping those bushes cut no higher than 3 feet, trees hanging, they're not hanging low, they're well manicured, and certain feet from the ground. So those are environmental. When we sort of look at how environmental plays a part in this, we look at this idea and we really also want to examine how are the housing designed? How is the block laid out? Some of the things are beyond our control, right? That's a builder control. That's a not a builder issue, but that's a builder decision, right? But as community people or community leaders, we have voices, and it is important that we exercise those voices, or when we vote, when those changes are happening, that we are in that decision making process. Because as you start to look through environmental designs, you'll notice like streets that have a mixture of public and private sort of entities, right? It becomes busier, it becomes more outside traffic from cities that are from areas that might not normally be in this neighborhood. Or even people, or not even people, studies show that one-way streets, right? One way in, one way out, that is going to deter crime. That is an environmental control. So we look at those environmental designs to sort of help curb or help sort of impact that crime rate. Again, this would be at a very community level, right? We could talk to our community leaders, we could talk to our nonprofit, but that would be the area for environmental to come in. So again, having that wraparound response and those trauma-informed responses would be including that cohesion piece, right? Because we are a team in this community. So we are going to move on to youth engagement programs. So, youth engagement programs are probably my absolute favorite. This is my jam. I love working with youth. I work with youth now. My entire adult life, I've worked with youth. And what makes this population extremely special to me is that we as adults, we as providers, we as organizations, we have the tools for them, right? They just need the resources. They just need the tools. They just need the things, and they will do it, and they will succeed in so many beautiful ways. So, for youth engagement programs, the concept of this is to target youth to provide positive activities and mentorship. So, some of the examples, of course, would be like those after school programs, sports leagues, and that includes sports leagues that are free, because we know that a lot of our youth or some of our youth don't have access to funds to pay for sports league. And so having that free or low cost sports league would do wonders in your community. And also those mentorship programs. So, just simply put, what is the benefit? The benefit is absolute reduction in juvenile delinquency and also enhanced life skills for young people. That is the absolute benefit and goal. I'm sure it's a whole lot more, but those are the two that we really, really want to look at. So here we have listed quite a few risk factors. So we have risk factors at a societal level, a community level, a relational level, and also an individual level. The one that I really want to focus on today is that community piece, right? And so our youth, they are at higher risk for poverty, lack of social supports, high level of truancy, limited employment opportunities, high level of incarceration, high levels of family disruption, gangs, and systems involvement. Those are quite a few, and that's just on a community level. That is quite a few risks that our youth are facing today. Even more when we throw on different vulnerabilities and how they manifest and how they work out. So, at a community level, those are some of the things that our youth are facing. And we know that with the ACE score or with any of the scores, it may be higher, more risk factors, or some lower risk factors. But we do know that our youth are experiencing a good level or a good check mark of these risk factors, right? So, as a community, because again, we're going back to that trauma informed approach of having wraparound responses, wraparound hands on levels of how can we help as a community, right? And that includes law enforcement, that includes schools, that include a lot of nonprofit organizations. How can we help? We look at some of those protective factors, right? Because with every risk, there have to be some type of protective factors to go in and sort of help the youth, right? So we want to look at that physical and psychological safety. And we're looking at a community level still. We want to make sure the physical and psychological safety. This will play into having those mentorship, having those after school programs, right? Because if I'm not safe, I'm gonna go where I feel is safe. It truly may not be it truly may not be safe, but it's safe to the youth. And that's when they kick in that survival mode, right? We see a lot of we call it survival sex and human trafficking, right? But it looks like that couch surfing. It looks like doing what I need to do by any means because my safety is compromised. And that also leads to high levels of crime and incarceration. So that is where our law enforcement piece comes in. Laws are consistently enforced. This is a big one because it goes back to me being in the schools and I'm hearing our youth discuss how they don't really feel safe going to law enforcement or they don't really feel safe going to X, Y, and Z because they know this person might get a slap on the wrist or they know that this person, we don't necessarily know the laws around sending images that are inappropriate, right? So, having those laws, knowing those laws, giving youth the resources to have discussions about those laws are going to be super important. Available resources to meet basic needs. Again, that falls into the category. Um, I don't think we often think of like programs for youth, like after school programs for youth. We think of like somewhere for them to hang out or maybe somewhere for them to go there, do their homework, which is absolutely perfect, right? Like we want that. We want those resources, but there's other resources available. I can only speak for Texas because I've been here all my life. But we have food banks, right? We have food banks that come to schools. We have food banks where they come after school and the youth and their family are able to shop for things to meet their basic needs. So, again, having that wraparound support, I'll give a perfect example. In my elementary school, I was able to bring in HEB, which is like the holy grail of grocery stores here in Texas. Like I would absolutely buy my car from HEB if they sold one. But at HEB, I was able to bring them out, but I also brought out law enforcement. So not only were my youth able to meet their basic needs, get information about mental health, but they were also able to see a person in uniform, have that interaction with them as well when they're not in a crisis situation or when we're not in a situation where we think we might be in trouble. So, having available resources to meet those basic needs. The next one we're going to move down to is opportunities for engagement within schools, employers, and communities, right? Having those systems that encourage goal settings and achievement. This is going to go into having those after school programs that help meet the needs with education, right? We may have to pay employers to stay after school to offer that one-on-one help with our youth. It may be in a community center, right? But having those systems that encourage goal settings and achievement. We see this usually a lot with like workforce solutions or just any other field that has employee resources, right? Especially for our kiddos that are in high school. We know that most youth are wanting to get a job, they're wanting to make money. How can we do this safely? So, having people in the community, having employers in the community to offer those resources and offer those goal settings to where they can have that individualistic sort of conversation and they're not receiving wrong information and it's going through another trusted adult hands to say, hey, I think this is a really great opportunity, you should take it, or hey, I think this might be a opportunity that someone may use to exploit you. But having those opportunities and having those support system is going to be very, very imperative. And that also falls into, I'm going to skip over one, but it falls into having the presence of mentor support for the development of skills and interests. We have that because, again, and it's so important for our youth to see someone who maybe is in the field, who has the knowledge. So making sure we're pairing them up or the youth have that support to say, hey, like there's things outside of basketball. I think you're really good at this, or I think you're really good at basketball. How can we get you started? How can we meet those needs or pair you with somebody and offer that support, right? So then we're going to go back up to the one that I skipped, which is that widely supported community prevention efforts. I know prevention is huge here in Texas. Of course, we want to prevent the thing from happening. So we're not harming youth or youth are harmed and they're not given the tools. A lot of that comes up in the curriculum, right? We have a not a number curriculum where we speak on human trafficking, but we also speak on bullying. What do you do if someone is bullying you, or what do you do when someone is unkind? We also greatly touch on healthy and unhealthy relationships. What does that look like? How might you seek support? What happens if you get yourself into a risky situation is another example from our curriculum. And we actually have a thing where you have to say, this person is a safe person. This is the person I can call if I need help. Right? So, implementing those prevention strategies and those efforts will go a long way. Not only are we in the schools and not only are we training adults to go run this curriculum in schools, but we also have caregiver training, right? So even not in our program, but other programs, having bringing adults into the conversation, bringing other people who might be stakeholders in the community into the conversation, having that again wraparound support is going to be a big critical piece in all of this because making sure everyone is on that same page, right? Even with law enforcement, making sure law enforcement is on the same page with those prevention efforts. How can we identify male victims, male survivors? How can we even cross over into making sure the LGBTQ plus community feels safe? Are we using the correct pronouns? Having that prevention support is going to help help and go really, really far when we're looking at just the community aspect with law enforcement as well. All right. So again, we're going to hop back to the spectrum of environmental design. I was supposed to talk on this before I went to youth, but we're here now and it's okay. So what is the primary prevention of environmental design? It's going to aim to reduce the incidence of crimes in communities. The secondary prevention is going to aim to reduce calls for police services. And then the last one is going to be to improve the overall quality of life and convey a sense of pride. So that's going to be super duper important when we're looking at environmental design, just those base prevention models. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to just touch on really quick with youth and just their programs, it's super important that as providers, as a community, as law enforcement, we are building those positive relationships with youth within the community. So looking at that trauma-informed approach, again, I was trauma-informed approach and I use that direct service approach. We want to directly aim to help youth within the community. And how does law enforcement help with that? I will definitely say I've seen it help with law enforcement involving youth in community programs, right? Receiving that direct feedback from youth in the community has been astronomically made a difference, honestly. Oftentimes we see organizations will have messages like a voice for the voiceless when talking about kids. But it's super important that we give the voice back to youth because oftentimes they know exactly what they're talking about. They know exactly what they need. And so I think that's a really important topic to think about, right? When we're being trauma informed. Youth are incredibly strong, they're incredibly resilient. And having youth have that feedback in the community and have that say is going to be super important because it sets up for their lives, right? So creating programs and building their knowledge and helping build their skills that highlight the youth strength is going to be something that it's going to be super important when thinking about how can I create a program to help youth. So not just creating a program, but taking those ideas, listening to the feedback of youth, and how can we highlight youth strengths is going to be also super important. So just to sum it up, those after school programs are going to look like the programs for youth are going to look like after school programs to make sure the youth have like a safe haven to study, stay out of trouble, avoid, I know we have gangs in Houston, so those centers are a safe haven to protect the youth from possibly looking for that family, looking for that sort of communal feel. It helps light years when that community is built in and we have many, many people touching hands on that youth, right? Almost every study show that if we do the prevention in school, we do the work after school, we have the resources for our youth. We give them the tools to make the decisions, they're more likely apply those and find stability within their lives and in their communities to give back. And so that's why I have youth programs mentioned, and I went into absolute depth about it because I think that's a really important piece of bridging that gap, especially with law enforcement. That's just one piece that they can also be intertwined and trauma informed and have that wraparound support, building that trust and that cohesion within the community. All right. So I want to make sure I leave room for questions. Again, I just wanted to say thank you. It's been an absolute privilege to speak to you today. I couldn't think of a better way to spend my Friday with just sharing my experiences. But yes, if you have any questions, I would love to hear them. or if you would like to email me any questions that you may have about the agency I work with or any questions to pick my brain, I am here for it. I love questions. I love dialogue. But again, if you have any questions that you would like to ask right now, I am here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. That was a phenomenal presentation. Lots of information. One of the questions was, how do you and your organization interact? We just saw a presentation from the Department of Homeland Security. How do you engage with that those type of those type of groups, if at all?
Could you repeat the question, Russ? Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit.
How do you interact or work with the Department of Homeland Security? We just heard from them in the previous session. Do you do any work directly with the Department of Homeland Security and the Blue Campaign?
Yeah, so at my organization at Love 146, we don't really, on my side, because I did the prevention and curriculum side, I don't really work with Homeland Security. We actually created this prevention curriculum that we teach the facilitators, and then we also run in schools. So right now, I don't have the pleasure of working with Homeland Security, but I do know plenty of organizations that exist in Houston that absolutely work with Homeland Security. I know when I did direct services at one of the nonprofits here, when I worked directly with commercially sexually exploited youth, we had quite a few cases that FBI picked up. And so we played a really pivotal part in making sure that like our case notes were handed over, any other of those any of it within my bandwidth as when I was an advocate, any way I could help with the FBI, I did. And so we worked with, JJC, Houston courts. We worked with quite a few partners, but at the current place of employment, I'm on the outskirts of it and we do a lot of the prevention in schools work. So how can I prevent it? How can I give the youth the tools needed so they're not caught up in CSAM material. But we also work with NCMEC, National Center for Exploitation as well. So we work with them, but not directly work with, if that helps, or if that answers your question.
No, it does. Thank you for that. So that's the one question that came in. But I'm sure people will have more. Thank you for providing your email address. Is that the website as well? I assume that
Yes, we are love146.org. If you go to the website, please check us out. And then if you have any direct questions, email me. And then if I can't answer the question because it's like a direct service question, I will be more than happy to direct you to the person that will be able to assist you.
Excellent. Chelsea, thanks so much for your time and your service in the community and participating in this event today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Russ. And thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.